Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for attending. I'm just going to share my screen and get started. My name is Tom Babin. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Indigenous Tourism Alberta. And my colleague, Lysandra, is here as well. Hi, Lysandra.
Hi everyone.
Lysandra is a marketing specialist. We make up the marketing team at Indigenous Tourism Alberta. So thank you for attending. What I'm going to do is share my screen here and walk you through this presentation. Can you guys confirm that you're seeing my presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so today's a brand update, and really it's an update after a number of sessions that happened earlier this year where we invited ITA members of the community. We spoke to some elders, all with the intention of helping us improve our brand. We've had a logo and some colors for a long time, but we've not had a more comprehensive brand to help us do our marketing. So this is really about the story that ITA shares when we market Indigenous tourism to the world. And really it's bringing together all the things we heard from everyone and trying to sort of find some commonalities between that into a story. So the first question I think is, why are we doing this? And I think lots of marketing people think they understand brands. We all have an idea of what a brand is, but I think sometimes it's worth going through this a little bit just to sort of set where we're at. So what is a brand? So I think we all know what a brand is, a way of marketing a company, but it really is, the best brands are a combination of the experience that people have, so the actual experiences that travelers have when they come to Alberta, mixed with the expectations they have. So it's the usage and the beliefs and thoughts. So a brand is much more than a logo and colors. It really is an idea. It's a story. It's an identity for an organization. And the best brands are really that meeting point between experiences and expectations. And that's a sweet spot right between those two circles. That's where the best brands want to visit. And if you think about other brands that you're aware of, the big brands in the world, like Apple, for example, the experience of a quality product, expensive product versus the expectation of that product when you buy it, that's sort of a good one. I think Nike is a good example, or Coke, for example. Those ones all exist in that spot between those two circles. And so a brand can be a lot of things to an organization. A good brand for an organization like ITA hits on almost every part of what we do. So when we advocate on the behalf of Indigenous tourism to the government, the brand is a big part of that. When we hire people and when we train people, the brand is a big part of that. When we do partnerships with other places and people in tourism, that's a big part of it. But for now, today we're talking about communications. This is sort of the first step. And when I say communications, what we mean is marketing, basically. What we say to consumers to try to inspire them to book a trip to Alberta and take in an Indigenous experience. So really that's what we're focused on today. So we worked with a marketing agency in the creation of this brand, and this is one of the mantras that they have, which I quite like. The best brands is not creating something. Really, it's finding the relevant, compelling, the emotional part of what already exists, and sort of clearing away everything else so that what you're left with is the core reality, like a core truth. The other important thing about a brand is that a brand has to be true. You can't lie your way to a good brand because consumers see right through it. And if their expectation doesn't meet the reality, it's not going to work. So the goal for us was talking to everybody that we could to find out what ITA means to them, what Indigenous tourism means to them, and sort of clearing away everything to get to the core. And I think what's important with that is too that with Indigenous tourism in Alberta, there's such diversity in experiences, in people, in levels of business, in language, in culture. I think one of our challenges was like, how do we find the commonality between such a diverse group in a way that will inspire travelers? So that's why we did this. Next up is what we heard. So when we did our webinars, when we did our focus group meetings, when we met with elders, when we did one-on-ones with stakeholders, We compiled everything that we heard and came back with some takeaways. And I think this part's important. This is what really goes into the brand. So I'll walk through a number of these things that we learned. And each of these slides has a quote from one of our members or someone we spoke with in developing this. So the first thing about Indigenous tourism is that it's important work. And my previous job was at Travel Alberta, and so I worked with a lot of non-Indigenous entrepreneurs in the tourism industry. And I think they would all say working in tourism is important, but I think it's a different in Indigenous tourism. I think it's a different level of importance. I think so many of our members are in tourism because they want to share culture, they want to increase understanding, they want people to have a better sense of Indigenous culture and language and history. And so it's really on another level of importance. And when you see quotes like this, like it bringing a sense of pride and reconnecting people to their roots, I think you can understand how tourism is really important to our members. And I feel this every time I meet a member or go on a member experience. It's just something close to the heart. It's very important. I don't think I've met anyone and I don't think I've ever met an ITA member who says, I'm in this to get rich. They're in it to do something more important than that. Secondly is sharing stories. We heard from members that sharing stories is fundamental to what they do. And we know the importance of sharing stories to culture and to the preservation of language and to understanding of the world and an Indigenous worldview. And so tourism is just an extension of that. I think sharing stories is just such a deep, important, fundamental part of the experiences that we offer. And a big part of that too is telling our stories. I heard this from members a lot, telling our stories on our land, on our territory. I think that's a super important part of it. The changing visitor, this is a really important part. A lot of members are telling us that the customers they have, the visitors that they're encountering are different than they were even 2 or 3 years ago. There's more of a desire to understand Indigenous culture, Indigenous people. People are, non-Indigenous people are seeking out these experiences in a way that they didn't before. And so it changes the experience, I think, for members who are offering the experience, but also for the traveler as well. So I think recognizing and responding to that sort of changing visitor is a really important part of what our members are doing. Our members also told us that cultural appropriation and protection is really important. We know there's a terrible history of Indigenous stories being shared by non-Indigenous people, that the truth gets lost when that happens. And it's really important to our members to be able to tell their own stories, that it comes from them, that it comes from Indigenous people. We want to protect culture, and ITA certainly has a role in protecting that and making sure that everything is authentic and true. I think that's a big part of it. And that part of that, I think, is authenticity. All of our members really care about authentic experiences, authentic products, authentically made Indigenous products. And I think ITA can play a part in that too by offering up that authenticity. So, we know, for Indigenous experiences, of course, what's so important is the experience itself, getting out there, like this quote is great, feeling the rhythm on the floor, hear the sound, feel the vibrations, like the authenticity of that experience, I think is really important. And I think that intimacy of the experiences that our members offer is really key as well. At the same time, we heard from members that there are still systemic barriers that need to overcome. I think that's no surprise to anybody. We all know that. And so we can't lose track of that. Both the barriers that our members face every day in their lives and also in the tourism industry. I think one of the things that ITA can do is sort of help overcome that. We do lots of work with non-Indigenous partners in the tourism industry to sort of remove those barriers. There's also barriers in attracting people to our experiences. I think there's a lot of fear and ignorance. We've heard this in our research, and we heard anecdotally from non-Indigenous travelers who they're interested in Indigenous experiences, but they don't really feel they don't know what they don't know. So they am I allowed to go on the reserve and visit? Can I go to a powwow? We hear those kinds of questions all the time, and we find that travelers, especially Canadians, I think, if they don't know, instead of asking, they just ignore, they just turn away. So I think it's one of the big challenges for us is to bridge that gap, really taking the step to invite people in so that we can really overcome those barriers. Another thing we heard from members is that Indigenous experiences are fun. There's a real sense of humor that often doesn't get portrayed in Hollywood or in any sort of depictions of Indigenous culture. There's the misconceptions that these are serious, that people are serious all the time. And, a lot of times there are serious conversations and heavy topics, but I don't think I've ever been on an ITA member experience and not laughed and had fun the whole time too. So I think it's important when we market Indigenous tourism that we depict that we laugh, we're friendly, that there's kindness, and it's not going to school and learning something. We want to educate people and increase understanding, but also reflect the reality that these experiences are fun as well. Connection is important too. So all kinds of connections. Members talked about connections to the land, to life on the land, to each other, to allies, culture, history, to pain, to pride, to reconciliation, I think. And so those connections are really important. And this goes deep into Indigenous culture and the Indigenous worldview, if you can call it that as well, I think too. So that connection is a deep part of it. And among those connections, what we heard repeatedly was that connection to the land. And so we want to make sure that is a central part of our marketing as well, that connection to the land. And we talked a lot about land at, internally at ITA, what it means, because I think from like a non-Indigenous perspective, the understanding of what the land is might be a bit different from an Indigenous person. And so we want to be conscious that, when we talk about the land, we're not talking about the piece of dirt that your feet are on, but it's the connections between people and plants and wildlife and the stars. And that's what we mean by the land. And I really like this quote about reconciliation with the land. I think that really is something important that travelers can take away from Indigenous experiences, is that connection to the land and that reconciliation with the land. So I think that's really important. Amplifying and unifying voices, I mentioned this earlier, but the diversity of Indigenous culture in Alberta is great. And a lot of our members are really, it's important to them that diversity is respected and reflected, because I think there is a perception among non-Indigenous people that Indigenous people are all the same. And of course, we know that's not anywhere close to being true. So one of the challenges is like, how do we amplify and unify voices in a way that we can market Indigenous tourism, but also respect the diversity that comes through? And I think one of the great ways of doing that is just telling authentic stories. I think if you're telling authentic stories of different people in Alberta, you're going to get that diversity come through naturally anyway. So that's one sort of a way to do it. Also a recognition that flexibility is required, and flexibility in a lot of ways, flexibility from our members, and that we have members who are at different levels of entrepreneurship of their businesses. Some are brand new, some are developing, some are very sophisticated, but also flexibility in dealing with visitors, because visitors are at different levels as well. Travelers have different levels of understanding. Some of them have different opinions. Some of them have love to share what they think they know. So there's some flexibility required, I think, among everybody. And I think that's part of overcoming barriers as well, is like flexibility across the board is important. And the last important piece to think about here is looking to the future. There is a tendency among non-Indigenous people to depict Indigenous culture as something in the past, as something historic. And of course, we know that's not true. So we're very conscious of that. Lysandra and I are always changing the tenses of words to make sure it's not set in the past. I think that's really important. And we have to look to the future. And I think the future is really exciting. And there's a ton of momentum. And we're at a great moment right now, too. So I think this is a natural extension of where we're going. So those are the things we heard from all of you, from all of our members that we spoke to about the ITA brand. And so the challenge now is to sort of take all of that and synthesize it into a tool that we can use when we're marketing and when we're talking about Indigenous tourism. So these are the important parts that we took away: sharing stories, cultural appropriation and protection, authenticity, healing and reconciliation, a spirit of fun, and powerful connections, especially the importance of connection to the land. So those are key parts of the brand, but also we didn't want to lose sight of this one, the importance of the changing visitor, because another thing about a great brand is that it not only does it depict your product, like what you're offering in an accurate way, but it aligns with what the visitor is looking for. So we know that the visitor is looking for something right now, so we want to make sure that our brand aligns with that. So we've identified an audience, which we're calling curious adventurers. There's sort of this is sort of marketing speak, but there's lots of ways of identifying audiences so that you can market to them. We've identified this one called curious adventurers, which is a type of traveler who is not out for the Instagram selfie. They're not here to hit a bunch of places just to get the shot and then go, but someone who really wants to explore. They want to learn, they want to connect, they want to understand, they want to take some time, they want to get off the beaten path. We think those are probably the travelers who are most likely to buy an Indigenous experience. And so that's who we want to market to. We also identified some key barriers through some of the research that we did. 63% of travelers still don't know where to find information about Indigenous experiences. We've seen in our existing marketing that there's not a lot of people searching, very few people go on Google and search for Indigenous tourism. And so that's one of our jobs, is to fix that. We want to make sure that we get better at that. There's still a lot of travelers worried they might say or do the wrong thing, and so they'd rather just avoid it and stay in their comfort zone. That's a challenge, but also an opportunity, I think. And those last two, are important as well. Like, so many people are keen to learn about authentic culture. They want to learn more. They want to do this, and they want to know their money is going to a good place. They want to know that speaks to authenticity, I think, too. So these are barriers, but also I think opportunities. When we're talking about connection, we talked about that word connection, and we realized that word is used a lot in marketing these days. Here are just some examples of other brands that use the word connection. So if you're a phone company or an airline, apparently you're connecting people. It seems to be coming all over the place. And so connection is important to us, but we want to go deeper. It's not enough. We need to what do we mean by connection, so we get beyond what these other brands are doing. And so in coming up with the brand, here's what we looked at. This is what we call the creative platform. It's kind of a wheel. It's a bit complicated here, but basically there's 4 parts to it. And we'll start over here on the right. So the right is what we are. So this is helping us understand what the brand is. So it's a pragmatic description of what we offer to the market. So this means it must be believable and authentic and true. So that goes into making up the brand. And all these things in blue are sort of the ideas behind the brand, and then the red bit we'll get to at the end, that's what consumers will see. So it's sort of like behind the scenes stuff, and then what's on stage is at the top. Who we're selling to. So this is about how we define our audience. So it's the needs and desires of the audience, what matters to them. That's who we want to identify as our key customer. And then what are we really selling? And so this is, when you get down to it, what are we actually offering as Indigenous tourism entrepreneurs in Alberta? So this is the emotional element that defines what our audience really wants to buy. So it's really connecting their offerings and their needs. And then that all sort of leads up to the thing that's on stage, which is a simple emotive position that connects with our audience and is brought to life in many different ways. So that's like the tagline. That's the important part that consumers will see. And so we built each of these out based on all of the information that we gathered from members. So we'll walk through. So this is now talking about specifically for ITA, what we are. Well, we think we are inspiring connections, intimate and inspiring connections made through, with, and for the land. And there's just a couple of key ideas here I want to call out. I think intimate is an important word because we have so many members who want to connect with travelers on a one-to-one way. It's that real human connection is super important, and we wanted to expand, not just say the land, but made through, with, and for the land. We just thought this would help people understand what we mean by the land, and not just that piece of dirt, but those connections between all of us in nature, humans, plants, wildlife, the stars, all of that. We want to make sure that connection really comes through. So intimate and inspiring connections made through, with, and for the land. Who we're selling to, so we're selling to curious adventurers, which we mentioned before, that sort of identified persona. But more than that, it's curious adventurers who want to learn and connect to Indigenous culture, but they're held back by anxiety and their lack of knowledge. So that last part, I think, is key when we do our marketing. We want to keep that in mind all the time so that we're really taking that extra step and making that invitation to help people overcome their fear. And what we're really selling is an invitation. So an invitation to join us on a journey of education, celebration, culture, togetherness, and of reconciliation. So I think that's an important part as well. So these are the three things that we took away. And then it all leads up to that part at the top of the wheel. This is what consumers will see. And this is a simple position that resonates with the audience and can be extended and brought to life in many ways. And what we came up with was this phrase: come walk with us. And so you can call this the tagline or the motto, whatever you want to call it. This is something that will define, what we think will define the marketing of Indigenous tourism Alberta in the future. And there's a couple of things about this. What I like about this is that it's invitational. So, we're taking that step. We're saying, come with us. We're taking the step of inviting somebody in. There was a quote from one of our members who said, in describing their experience, we're literally opening the door of the teepee and inviting people in. I think that's really reflected here as well. Walking, come walk with us. I think this is a metaphoric walk. Sometimes it's literal. I mean, lots of our members offer plant walks and hikes and that sort of thing, but it's metaphoric in that we're going on a journey. And when you walk with somebody, it's a bit more intimate. It's a connection you have with them one-to-one. It's connected to the land. And so all of those ideas that we talked about before are really, the intention here is for all of them to come together into this phrase, into this idea of come walk with us. And so to help flesh this out a bit more, we wrote what we call the brand story, and that's what this is. So you can see how the brand can come to life in different ways here. Come walk with us is the tagline, but you can interpret it and use it in many different ways. You could walk with us and connect to the land. You can sit with us, share our stories or hear our voices. Eat with us, taste the flavors. You can grow with us, laugh with us, or dance with us. So you can see how it is. We hope that we can use this in ways that reflects the diversity of our members in all the different experiences, all the different nations, all the different languages. Excuse me. In a way that will resonate with consumers. Excuse me. Another way to think about it is to get a bit deeper. When you're walking with someone, you're more open, you're honest. When you walk with someone, you're spending time, you see things through their eyes, you can connect to the land and to each other. It's unified and inclusive. It's a way of getting past that trepidation. It's extending a hand, it's warmth and welcomeness, which I think is absolutely reflective of the experiences that are offered by many of our members. It also means you can laugh and joke and be light. But you can also have those deep and profound connections as well. So what does that look like in marketing? Well, we haven't started yet. We're still collecting feedback. That's kind of why we're here today. So we want to hear everybody's thoughts, but here's some ideas of how we think it might look. We just made up some ads. You can see how these are photos of members, and if you depicted this way, I really like how it feels really invitational and welcoming, and like who doesn't want to come and meet these people and spend some time with them? You can see how it can work in Facebook ads, for example, in different experiences, from a winter beading session to some food, a culinary experience, to learning how to dance. But it all comes under that come walk with us idea. And I should say too that come walk with us maybe not be used in every ad we do, but the ideas behind it will be. I think that's what helps give us some focus and some unity. Some other ads, these are Instagram ads that we could use, all based on that idea as well. And so we are really at the point now where we're looking for feedback on this. Hopefully it's reflective. What's really important to us is that everybody can see themselves using these ideas in their own marketing, in their own businesses, and that kind of thing as well. So, we're looking for feedback, and then over time, we'll extend it out to all of our marketing. Hopefully members will be able to use it, and it'll extend to all parts of ITA and Indigenous tourism in Alberta. The intention of this is to market not just in Alberta, but across Canada and into international markets as well. So that I really think that invitational message extends across cultures and cross markets as well. So my email address is on there. Please send feedback anytime. Brands are always a work in progress too, so I'm sure it will evolve over time. And so we want to hear from you whenever we can.